Hi, everyone. So excited to be here again, especially with my good friends Dave Snell and Jason Gerardo. And today's key word of the day is support, a word that everybody can appreciate, and especially in these times of volatility and change, support is essential. So to kick it off, let's go to Dave and let's catch up with Dave, but also his initial thoughts on support.
Thanks, Don. It's a pleasure to be here. Jason, to see you again as well. I know we'll have a good one with this one. Support is, my initial thoughts are we all have support structures, whether we recognize that we do or not. And it's a matter of identifying them in the times of need and then leaning on them. So many times we say, I don't have anyone, I don't have support. But there's a friend, there's a coworker, there's a family member who doesn't necessarily know how to react or how to reach out to identify that you need the support, and yet they're there. And when you need them the most, they will find a way to help you.
Yeah, that's so true. Jason, love to hear your first read.
Yeah, good morning, and obviously great to be here with you gentlemen this morning. It's always good. Getting on the road after this to go visit some relatives, and that's going to be supporting both of us. Getting over to see family. It's you think you're giving, but you're also getting, and that's so many relationships. When I thought about this, obviously this conversation is going to be smooth and easy for us, and once again, one that we can go for hours because we're all about that being of service. I think that's something we all share, and this community is very much about that. But I wanted to share a story, a quick little thing, because I was thinking about support and I was thinking about this conversation today, and so I'll take a little extra of my time here in this first segment. Thinking about, say you have triplets, two boys and a girl, and they're about 4 years old, 5 years old, whatever that age is when they're going to take those training wheels off their bike, and you're going to teach all three of them how to ride a bike with no training wheels, and you go out there and you try to show all three of them the exact same way how to learn it, and it just falls apart. It's just a disaster. There's tears, there's all kinds of, it just doesn't work out the way you planned it. So you go to the first child, the first boy, and you say, well, what's wrong? How can I help you? And he's like, I don't want you to do anything. I just want you to be here and cheer me on. I just want you to be supportive and tell me I'm doing a good job and just let me go. Okay, I can do that. He goes to the second one, the little girl, and what do you want? And, she says, well, I just want you to hold the seat and help me get moving. And then once I get moving, just let go of the seat and let me go. I could do that. And the third one, what do you want? I want those training wheels back on. I'm not ready yet. Put the training wheels back on. Let me learn a little bit more, and then I'll be ready to go. And that's all support, but it's different for each person. And so many times we try to support someone the way that we would want support that we miss the fact that we're not truly being supportive. We're just interjecting, and maybe some may say our ego is interjecting. But it's like, know the support that you want, similar to love, the love strategies, right? So I think it's very important to, when you approach to support somebody, know what they truly need and what they really want.
Yeah, that's so valid and important. When I think of support, and usually most people, when they think of support, they believe someone's in trouble and needs help.
Right.
But in a lot of cases, support is uplifting,
Yeah.
is not correcting a bad situation, but improving a good situation to make it better. And a lot of it isn't the doing, it's the listening. It's the being there for someone. No one really likes being told what to do, especially if there's judgment involved. Well, you're really falling off and you're a mess and you need to do this and everything else. And that just made it harder for that person to trust you.
Yeah.
Because you've already brought your judgment into it. You haven't asked questions. What got you here? Why are you doing what you're doing in a positive, friendly way instead of a judgmental, kind of intimidating way? Because people tell you anything you want to hear if you phrase it in a certain way. And I think just knowing that there's someone there without judgment. Jim Rohn once said, a friend is defined by somebody who, if you're falsely detained in a foreign country, will be there the next day. And how long? As long as it takes. How much will they spend? Whatever it takes. And knowing that you have people in your as a backstop, just in case, gives you a little bit more freedom to do things, knowing that if you slip, there's someone there that might catch you. And also, sometimes you just make mistakes. It isn't a fault as much as it is a bad decision. Some people invest in things and make money, other people lose money. It's still the same act of investing. And where do you go from here is the biggest element. Everybody knows where you've been. Pretty much most people know where they are. But where is this leading? And I think progressive support helps. You know, there was somebody who, I was listening to my Audible today, and some great speaker, forget who it is, actually with Jim Rohn. And he says, you know, my kids used to always come to me and ask me for things. And I would say, you know, there's so much money in our vault. So there's no question as to the ability to buy them. The question is, do you deserve them? And eventually my daughter would say, I need $10, and I'd say no. And she would eventually say, what could I do to make $10? And then I would open up and say, okay, well, if you clean the room or do something around the house here, you know, so it would connect the money with an act of earning it and
Right.
deserving it. And a lot of it is baby steps, you know, hey, just get out of bed today. You know, that's a big thing for some people, and just eat a little bit better. So just incremental support can go a long way. Dave?
Yeah, I think that's all great information. I'm sitting here thinking that sometimes the best support we can provide, whether it's money, whether it's a shovel because you need to get rid of a dead body and that you know that person will support them, whatever it is, a lot of times in today's day and age, it's just to be there and listen. Like you said, Don, without judgment. I need to vent, so I need someone to talk to. I don't need to say anything back to them.
Mm-hmm.
They just need me to listen. I have a couple of friends who've gone through that recently. They're stressed out about their jobs. They're stressed out about their kids. I can't relate to some of the stuff they're going through as far as the job, you know, the government work and all that, because I'm not a government worker and I have other things that I'm worried about. And I just let them vent. Okay. I'm sorry to vent. Okay, well, why else am I here if you can't talk to me?
Right.
And then yesterday I was on a ride along for investigator job, surveilling. Girl had to call a girlfriend. She's like, hey, sorry, I had to vent with her. And I'm like, look, I couldn't relate to what your subject was. I don't judge. You know, we're just connecting here. And I think it gets back. I'm glad I said the word connecting, because I see this as the bigger issue with a lot of people is, again, we've said many times on the show, technology is our greatest enemy because we just get so sucked into it. We don't connect with people, and you cannot support if you can't connect. And that's the key element. It's human connection to understand somebody, but also to keep it confidential. I'm not going to go blabbing to my mates or come on here and say, oh, this girl was complaining about this, or my friend was specifics, and say their names and what they're up to. Having a support structure means you feel safe. You know what you said is going to be between you and the other person. I have built up a support structure of my own where I know that when I'm depressed, and we've talked about my journey several times, I have one person that I know if I am ever in the darkest ever place, I'm calling him. And I know that he is going to stay on that phone and drive to wherever I am to get me through it. Now I've moved to Florida. He's in Florida. It's closer. And we've both been, but we've had a connection because we've been through similar incidents, you know, similar journeys. And it's very important, connecting to somebody so you can support them.
Yeah, those are so important and valuable points that everybody should take note of. Jason?
Yeah, you both said the same thing with different words, and I love it. Don, you had talked about trust, and Dave, you just mentioned feeling safe. And I think that's so important in a truly supportive environment, you know, and to the stories we're telling about giving $10 or earning $10, it's so true. You know, what are you going to do? Are you going to just show up and go, oh, here? I would rather someone not give me something of monetary value, but truly be supportive of me and let me vent or whatever that looks like emotionally, than to go, oh, here's $10, just go away, kid. You bother me. WC Fields, for the really old people, and I was raised by old people, so I know that, But that's very important. And the other thing, and Dave, our military dark humor showing up to bury the body, it came to my mind immediately when Don was talking before you said it. But anyway, so that's so true too about being supportive. I wrote down, I'll be there, and level of commitment. That's two things that are important to me. And I'm not the most accessible friend. I'm not the greatest friend in that sense, but my relationships have very deep roots. And if you call me at that 3 a.m., you call me, I need to help get rid of something. With very few exceptions, I'm there. I will make it happen, and this isn't tooting my horn. That's just like talking about levels of support. And you have friends that you're like, oh, hey man, we're both in town, in 30 days, we're both going to be in town, whatever. I see your calendar, you have no events. Can we get together? Well, we'll see. Maybe. Well, I really got some stuff I'd love to go through. Well, let's, I got stuff too. Well, let's just see. And that's the level of that relationship, and just be aware of it. So when you get into a supportive relationship, or if you're in a relationship and you're looking for support, just know where you're both at. Be honest about it.
Yeah, honesty is typically the best policy in most situations. And, it's almost like going to somebody and says, well, here's spaghetti and meatballs. I made it for you. I hope you'll like it. Versus calling up a little bit in advance and say, or when you show up, what is it I can do for you? Right. Maybe there's one single thing that they need, and they don't need a discussion, and they don't need your whole viewpoint. Because I think people lose the point, which is it's about them, not you. And too many people want to feel important. People want to feel like I can do it for you. Well, one day or in an hour, you're going to leave there. They're going to have to do it for themselves. And wherever they are typically didn't happen overnight, and typically it's not going to go away overnight. It was like, come on over and help me change my tire. Well, that's a simple thing. You can get support there. Well, look who we've got. We've got Harvey. Good to see you, Harvey. Always great to have you support us with the word support. And I know I'm always trying to support Harvey. And I think that's where co-support comes in. It's like you ratchet up together, and because you believe in something or somebody more than sometimes yourself, it's enough to carry the day. So always promoting Harvey. I know Harvey has his shows on Tuesdays and Thursdays following this, and I'm just very impressed. I actually saw Harvey's latest newsletter and really get more involved in his core field of franchising. So thanks again, Harvey. Usman's here. I hope I pronounce it. Good afternoon, my friends, Don and friends. Chep it up. You people are doing good work. Best wishes to each and every one. Well, there's support right there, and encouragement. So again, it doesn't have to be trouble. It just has to be identifying, here's an area that someone decides, hey, you're pretty good at it, and I like to compliment you. And that's why being a complimenting person shouldn't be a scarcity. Some people wait for a miracle to happen to say, great job, and other people are, hey, you picked up your dishes. Great. Thanks so much. Until you identify, do people identify? Well, I didn't know I was that helpful. Thank you. And what does it say? Well, you took care of me with a compliment. I'm going to be more thankful. Here's Carrie's joke. What's a doodle's favorite type of music? Anything with a good beat and a sketchy bass line. Okay. Sometimes Carrie's ahead of me, which is good.
I get that one.
So, Dave, love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, Don, the thing that went through my mind as we were just talking, as you were just going through these, is support doesn't have to be to somebody either. Mm-hmm. If you go around being a miserable schmuck, people around you are going to feel that. But if you go around and you're happy, even if you're just exuding it, you don't have to be happy. You just need to exude it, and just giving somebody hey, I'm proud of you. Hey, that suit looks great. You're supporting them without even knowing it. and without them even understanding who you are or what you're going through, support doesn't have to be about a long-term built relationship of coexistence and co-experience. It can be just the relationships that we interact with how many people throughout a day, just through a nod or an eye glance to deep conversations for an hour on LinkedIn and Restream. But if we can just say something nice, we don't know what they're going through. Maybe that one thing nice has supported them, has built them up to say, I was seen, I was heard, I made a right choice with this outfit or this hat or these glasses, whatever it is that we've said something nice about. Support doesn't have to be a long-term built relationship. It can be a passing glance in history, if you will.
Absolutely. So important. Jason?
Yeah, it's a great point. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. As our friend Kelly talks about, that simple smile, you don't know that you could change someone's life with a simple smile. And that is supportive. That's not trying to be supportive, but it is supportive. I mean, there's a huge difference too. Sometimes when you try to be supportive, it just doesn't work out the way you had planned it. But, when we step back and we look at what does this person truly want or need, you're going to get better results and you're going to see it. And I think it's so important, there's a Buddhist saying about being charitable without the act of charity in mind. I think it goes the same way. Be supportive without the act of supporting, being supportive in mind. It's how you show up. It's how you act. It's, to Dave's point, it's just those interactions. It doesn't have to be, well, I've known Dave for 2.3 years now, so I'll support him. And Don's been supportive of me and helped me on the show and helped me grow. And so I'm going to be supportive of him. It's not the tit for tat, it's a mindset, and I want to support everyone, and at the same time, you have to support yourself. We'll change gears. I'll change gears a little bit here. You have to know when, I was talking about with my friends, give me that 3 a.m. call. If I've got something going on with like, say, my wife, or, I've got my values levels too, I'm sorry, I can't go right now. If I have something at that level. With that said, though, if that's not happening, I'm definitely there. So being supportive of yourself is very true. Don't give someone your last drink of water. You have to, the empty pitcher doesn't pour to anybody. So there's that balance as well. We've got to find balance in how we help others and help ourselves.
Yeah, that's so true. And we're bringing up so many different elements of support today. It's really about how you talk to yourself, like Jason just mentioned, self-help, self-support. Are we really out there projecting a positive image? The last thing someone in trouble needs is someone to tell them their troubles. That's worse than even telling somebody what to do. There's a lot of people say, well, you think that's bad. Let me tell you what happened to me. Or my cousin just had an incident like yours. And after a while, you'll never have to worry about getting a call. Because after that, it makes someone feel better when you weren't there. And some people are just downers. Some people are will bring you up like an elevator, and other people will bring you down like an elevator. And you just got to determine for this situation. And some people who will support you, you're afraid or ashamed, and maybe for good reason, to talk to them about it. And a lot of times your best support might have been your biggest issue. So how do you tell them, I'm feeling awful because of what you just did? Come over here and make it right. And being clear is important. But again, without judgment either way. I know you're busy. I know you don't like me, but I need you right now. Well, that's not a good way to start. It's like a backhanded compliment, I suppose. Dave.
Yeah, all great stuff. And I think the lesson I take out of your comments, Don, is know your subject, know your person that you're talking to, because you can say something the most well-meaning. And the example I'm kind of walking through in my head here is, well, you didn't go through the same thing my uncle did or my cousin did or my brother did. To your point, Don, I can always reframe it if I know my subject. I hear what you're saying, and please understand you're going through something that somebody else has gone through. I had one of my, I'll call him my nephew. He was embarrassed to call me to tell me that he'd gotten fired. And I said, look, okay, let's walk through the story and what happened here. And I said, look, it sounds like you didn't get fired for something you did, but it's a personality, it's a right to work state, the whole 9 yards. And he said, yeah, but it just feels so bad. And I said, everybody goes through this. You're not the first and you won't be the last. You need to understand that you experience these things. I didn't go to him and say, yeah, well, I got fired 5 times over my career, or I got this. It's all about how we frame things and knowing your subject. And again, it goes back to connection, knowing what they're going to respond to or not. Don, you're absolutely right, though. I mean, if I go into every conversation with, well, I was depressed and I did this and I did this and I did this, why do I want to keep calling? Why would someone want to keep calling me to hear my story when they're trying to vent or to do whatever? There's a balance, and I've struggled with it through the years. Don't get me wrong. We all go through it. It's just a matter of being aware of our self, our connections, our support structure, if you will, and our feelings at the time that whatever we're being presented with evokes.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple more friendly individuals in the audience want to recognize Omar. Omar is a champion. I follow him, and he does so many incredible things for so many people, and really is the definition of support.
Yeah.
And without judgment. So thank you, Omar. Looking forward to getting back with you. Harvey says, going to be driving a minute, but want to know that I'm here to support all 3 of my favorite people on the screen. I always bringing others up, sharing experience. I want to thank you all. Well, your thanks is well appreciated, and that's part of the support is the conversation, the communication. You know, I was listening to something, I believe, yesterday, and they say the effectiveness of a speaker is 30% of how you say what you say, and 50% of your body language while you're saying it. Only 20% is your content. So it goes back to that saying I always use is everybody hears your music before they hear your words, right? Is this a friendly person? If you're coming in with a bad, intimidating posture to someone, you know, if you're pointing at someone or getting a little bit aggressive, no matter what you say is not going to resonate as well as if you show a little kindness, a little calmness, you know, and maybe set the stage. Maybe it's a good idea we have a cup of coffee first, right? Or maybe we talk about what we're interested in. You know, how are the Tigers doing this year? If you got somebody from Detroit, you know, and then you can lead into it, because you can't open a jar until you can't fill a jar until you open it, right? You need to make people available, accessible, comfortable. Is this a good time? If it's not a good time, we can make it another time. But what you don't want to do is go down a road that's already full of bumps and all kinds of issues that you have to overcome in addition to it. And I think that's really key. And also is like, let's start, you know, instead of saying, how do we finish this? You know, the key is okay, we're at the beginning here. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for thinking of me, you know, and in essence, you do yourself a favor by helping somebody, because how many times in your life will somebody come to you who you really care about and you have an opportunity to change things for the better? Not often. You know, usually someone said, bring the mayonnaise when you come or something like that. That's simple. But, you know, someone says, you know, I got myself in a situation. I need you to send me $1,000 and I don't even have time to discuss it. Can you do it? And if you know the person and care about the person, it's like, no question. You know, is that all you need? You know what I mean? Let's take care of you. And that might be once in 5 or 10 years you get a call. Right. Meanwhile, people spend $1,000 on something and they forgot what it was a month or two later. So it's all relative, you know, even at times when I was in grocery stores, and there's always an opportunity for someone to say, oh, don't have enough money. And it's usually somebody who's hungry and somebody who really needs that food. And inevitably, there's always someone who says, here's $2. Don't take it off the cart, you know? And what was that $2 to you? In today's age, nothing really. But look at the difference you make. And the other thing is it reverberates. When you help people other people find out about it. And you don't do it to be recognized, but somebody will say their cousin, Don or Dave or Jason came over, helped me out, brought some dinner for me. Usually when someone passes away, people have a get together, a celebration where people bring food or bring flowers. And how do you contribute? And it's an opportunity. Most people run from those opportunities. Oh, it's depressing. Oh, it's a lot of trouble. Oh, it's a lot of work. What you're saying is you're not up to it. Or if it affects you, you are, but when it affects somebody else, you aren't. And it's a generous spirit that you need to bring to the table. And once you understand everybody's human, you make mistakes, everybody makes mistakes, you'll continue to make mistakes. But how much are those mistakes keeping you back? That's the key. And the saying says, it's not how many times you fall down, it's how fast you get up. The fall downs are going to happen. Laying down is not the answer. Going backwards is not the answer. It's like, how do you put one foot in front of the other and start again? And that's where reinvention, and we talked about that before, comes into play. I forget, Dave?
Yeah.
Dave.
I liked your story about, somebody at the grocery store. I had that happen a couple of months, it's been about 2-3 years. I think the concept of paying it forward is important as well. If somebody helps you, help somebody else without them even knowing that it was you. I went right back into the store. I'd forgotten my wallet. I generally carry cash separately from my wallet. It's just a little billfold, not even a billfold, but a Ridge wallet that I have. So I don't have my cash in there, and I forgot my cash or whatever it was. So I went by my car. I came back in. The guy had already left. I was going to pay him back. So I just gave the cashier, I said, hey, here's $20 or $50. Let somebody else, pay for them when you realize they can't pay for it. They don't know who I am, and I'm not doing it to be known or to be recognized or be awarded. It's just something nice to do for somebody else because they supported you. We've talked many times here about, being there for somebody because they have reached out to us, but just reaching out to somebody else and making a list of, I'm going to check on somebody or reconnect with somebody so many times a month or year. That alone is a support structure that somebody may not know that they had because they're going through something, but they don't feel they can reach out to you or to anybody else for that matter, because they're going to be a burden on you or they're going to be a struggle to get through. But if you reach out and you say, hey, I'm just thinking about you, what's going on? And then they unload because somebody reached out to them and they didn't even realize they needed the time to vent. That's an important element as well. I mean, how many times have we had friends say, well, I'm going through something, but I didn't know who to reach out to. Or I knew I could reach out to you. Sorry, that's where I'm going. I knew I could reach out to you, but I just didn't feel the timing was right, or I didn't know what you were going through. But if you've reached out to them, that opens a door that they now see as a possibility to say, they are there for me. They are thinking about me when I'm not reaching out to them. And that's an important aspect is you might need to make the first overture to say, hey, I'm here, and then they'll open up to you. And then you can be that support structure that they needed at the time. And they didn't even know that you were really there for them, or they thought they were going to be a burden, but now you've shown that they're not a burden.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, practicing this small acts of kindness can elevate you to a more giving being and a more satisfying being, because you're better off being the giver than the needer. I'm always happy to say, happy to help you out, and back in my mind, happy it's not me too, right? So, and be in a position where you can afford to give. And we're not talking major financial commitment. We're just talking about being a good friend, sharing, and knowing that, just a reassurance that, hey, I'm always here for you. Because most people say, hate to bother you or too bad he had to get up in the middle of the night to come over. And usually that'll happen with older people, especially relatives. You know, I know being a caregiver for my mother the last couple of years of her life was extremely challenging, and I didn't really appreciate what caregivers go through.
Right.
You know, and how you actually give up your life style, at least, to help somebody else's situation that can't help themselves.
Yep.
And most people, it's like, what am I going to get for it? How much do they pay you? You know, why did you bother? You know, they're so transactional. Jason?
Yeah, and I see we have a comment. I want to touch on it because it does tie into exactly what we're talking about, and it's beautiful. It's Carolyn. I'm not familiar with her, but you know, sharing a tip about starting to really use LinkedIn and we're talking about support, so it's a beautiful segue. If you show up on LinkedIn looking, you know, they say if you want to be many different things, but if you want to be supported, be supportive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the key to LinkedIn. The first step is start to build a community. You know, reach out to people that are like-minded, people that have interests as you, and make it personal and reach out to them. You know, because once again, you're going to support those. You know, rapport is what? Rapport is we like those that are like us. And so you build that rapport. So if you just cold call, so to speak, people and just shoot out these requests to connect, you know, they'll look at it and be like, oh, maybe we have something in common. But if you reach out and make it personal, that makes it better. So you build that community. And then what you start doing is then you support them. You show up, you know, and this isn't like, oh, this is a strategy. This is a tactic. This is just being a good person. And when you have good actions, you get good results. And you show up for these people. You support their posts, you comment on their posts, you interact with them, you like them, and it builds. And that just builds up, and then they'll start supporting you. And that's just that's the natural flow. And it really happens on LinkedIn because people are caring on here. People really want to make that connection and do want to really support each other because we're all just trying to make it work. You know, if someone shares something with you, I did this and it worked for me, thank you. You know, that's great. Let me give it a try. So if you really want to do it, my advice is you build community. And how do you build community? By being supportive. And that's the first place to start.
Yeah, I think that's essential to getting off to a good start. And it's really deciding who do you want your circle of influence to be. Mm-hmm. You get to choose, you know, and people are doing what you want to do or people you want to follow because you'll learn from their example. And modeling is so important in all areas of support.
Yeah.
You know, what did I leave them with? Did I leave them better than I found them? You know, it's like that. Did I leave the log pile bigger than I find it every day? You know, when do you add a little bit extra to it? It's not just you wanted this. Well, I thought you might need this in addition to it, right? Here's a blanket or here's a fan if it's warm in your house or whatever it is. It shows you did more than just drive over. I baked a cake. I found something I know is important to you. Or here's my musical list or whatever it is, you know, and get into little things that can make a difference. Again, you're not going to be the person, you can't want something more than somebody else. Let's just say that. Yeah. You know, I wish they would do this. I hope you can do this. It's like, well, they're only going to do what they're capable of doing. And most of what their capability is their motivation level. I'm so depressed I can't get out of bed. Whatever I do seems unnecessary or not good enough. And, you know, I was listening again to that Audible today, and what you say to yourself has cellular influence.
Right.
You know, if you say, I'm a loser, I'm sick, I'm just awful, I'm this, and you live in embarrassment and shame, your body picks up on those messages. At the same time, other people pick up on your body language too. And, you know, this person is beyond help until they become open to it. And that's why some people have to get sick and tired of being sick and tired before they do anything. They got to hit rock bottom almost to say, you know, nothing can be worse than this. So what do I have to lose by changing? You know? And I think people give too many other people too much power over their self-belief system. Yeah. You know, everybody told me I was this, they're right. You're confirming things. Why? How many, at a certain point, when is enough enough? How many days do you stay in bed before you say this is the day? Because what do you got to lose? Again, logic does not always win the day because not everybody is logical. And some people suffer through things that they just can't get over. And I can understand that if you did something that was just terrible, and not even on purpose. I remember as a young kid, I just got my license at 16, and my grandmother, who only lived a few miles away, asked me to take her to the grocery store. And I said, okay, Grandma, I'll be over later. And, and all of a sudden she decided to walk on her own. Just happened. She was diabetic, got dizzy, fell down on the cement, and somebody helped her, and somehow my mother got involved in it. But that was something I said, why didn't, you don't know what you don't know, but I should have just been there lickety split and said, no problem. I just assumed, hey, what's the difference in a couple hours? And I assumed she wouldn't walk without calling, but at a certain point, people don't like to ask twice either.
Right.
And sometimes you don't even know you're turning somebody down until you get to that point. So Dave?
Yeah, I think, Jason, I think your points on community and LinkedIn are very important. And it occurs to me that, a couple of things Don said over the last couple of years we've worked here is being selective with your community. You don't go into LinkedIn and just connect, and that's it's connection. It's getting together with somebody, if you will, with everybody. Be very selective with, okay, here are my interests. I'm not going to connect with somebody from Timbuktu who's into, macrame if my interests are water sports. But it just is incongruous. So why would I do that? You've got to be attentive to what your interests are and what your purpose is. I go back to meaning and my focus all the time. If it doesn't align with my purpose, why would I connect with it? And then to your point, Don, is people forget that trauma is generational, and we have to finally hit that spot where enough is enough. Hitting rock bottom is one thing, but I forgot where I was going with this because it wasn't very dynamic, I guess, in my head. It's a struggle to know when you've hit rock bottom. Even, we have a point where we just have to say enough is enough. I'm not going to, take this anymore. I'm not going to support a negativity in my life. And the angle is sometimes you have to get rid of people so that you can be supported, so you're not being weighed down by these negative thoughts and people around you. So you got to load shed. And it goes to, I'm trying to make a connection here in my mind of sometimes it's okay to go through your list on LinkedIn and say, they're not doing me any good. I don't need them. A lot of people, Carolyn, I found I've got to get 10,000 followers on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever. But that doesn't do you any good. Again, being selective with your community so that they're not weighing you down, just for numbers' sake is not healthy. It's not supportive. But if I have 10 friends that are going to support me, that's better than having 1,000 friends who just are there and don't do anything.
You're so right, because that can be so distracting and diluted. Jason?
Kind of what we're touching on, but I wanted to get into it because we're coming around the bend here, is, and I'm gonna use the word worthy, but that implies judgment. But we talked about being supportive without judgment, but you also have to have eyes wide open. The example that I wrote down, that I was thinking of when I wrote this note is that, what does the person do with the support you give them? If you're showing up because that's the right thing to do. You're showing it because that's who you are, But if, as an example that I was thinking of, if someone's like, hey man, I'm having a really hard time. I could $200 would really help me out and get me over. I just got this bill coming up and blah, blah, blah. And if you could do it, you're like, okay, yeah, here, I've got it. Here's $200. Hope everything works out. Let me know if I can support you in some other way. And then next time you see them, they're wearing $150 Jordans shoes, You're like, wait a minute, and they're brand new. You're like, wait a minute. You were struggling, and I helped you out, and now you got some $200 shoes. What's going on? So, in the same way, that's a very tangible way to explain it. But also, if you're giving people support and you keep helping them out, and you keep theoretically pulling them out of a hole, and then you show up and they got a shovel, and they keep digging, and they're digging deeper. You're like, wait a minute. Am I doing the right thing for myself? Am I being supportive of myself and who I am by keep going back to that and keep giving in a way that's not there? How can I support you in a different way that's going to help you achieve your goals long term?
Yeah, and I think building responsibility and accountability is important, right? People have to take ownership of what their situation is and take responsibility. And good people say, it was my fault. I should have never done that. And most people play the blame game.
Right.
Well, the weather was awful. I was tired. I mean, so what? Everybody has to deal with pretty much what everybody else deals with. And it reflects back to when my son first went to college, and he went to University of Nevada, Las Vegas, had a little bit of a scholarship. But he never kept things organized. It was like, I never thought he'd hang out there and make it, to be honest. And what I did initially is I gave him 2 credit cards. It was a Visa with a pretty good limit and American Express just in case. And I said, listen, I never want to hear you did dumb things for small money, right? So if you need it, you got no excuse. Here's the cards, right? Use them if you need them. And he never used them. Once in a while, I'd see a gas charge, maybe a little Whole Foods. And I'd say, Jonathan, I'm so proud of you because he found a job. He got paid as a coach for the high school lacrosse team. And he found his way. And eventually I said, hey, listen, you're living in one of the most unbelievable towns in the world. And they have so many wonderful restaurants. Why don't you do me a favor? Take a friend out once a month to a really nice meal, because I know how they used to eat. And actually, when I used to visit, I'd put him on the room and say, come here, eat as much as you want, take your buddies with you, charge it up. And he was still pretty responsible. But, it shows you don't have to ask for it. I'm going to provide it. Now you're going to have to justify your responsibility to it. Yeah. Right? If he would have started charging $500 here or $800 here, it'd have been a different ball game. But at least give someone the ball. Yeah. How many times have people wait on the sidelines? Put me in, coach. Put me in, coach. Well, they're always playing somebody who's always playing or someone who's performed. But when you get that chance, be ready for it, and it'll justify more trust. And more trust will provide more support. Pay a loan back, you're probably in a good position to get another loan for maybe even more money. And I think the other thing I'd share with everybody for support, be around people. That's so important. I remember when I was going through some really down times, and I'd never experienced that. I never knew what depression was. I just thought it was someone who just feels bad. Was a mood, an attitude. And when I found places I didn't even know existed, and it's like you thought you were at the bottom and you go down 4 more floors, and you find a whole world where you don't even fit anymore. You're an outsider. You look at everybody having fun and having a great time, and you think, I used to be like that, thought nothing of the people on the sidelines, and now I'm on the sidelines. And eventually I went to, there was a church around here that had Wednesday programs and Saturday programs. People would show up. And I started to get distracted. I started to hear other people's messages. And I think Dave made an earlier point. The loneliness, the knowing or thinking I'm the only person dealing with this. I'm all by myself. And when you get around a lot of people, especially in a support group, and they start sharing their things, and it's like, well, now the people who need help are helping each other. Why? Because they're coming from the same place, trying to go to the same place. And it's harder when you've been up to be down. If you've never been up, you don't know what down is. but to go from the light into the dark and then back to the light or vice versa is very difficult. We've got another new individual here, Chawan. Yes, just follower number is not important. Most important thing is real relationship. Be around people. I'll remember that. And you're one of the people that are around other people. So again, that's where the co-support comes from. And have a buddy, who understands what you're going through, because they're going through the same thing. And you might be able to save each other a lot of time and a lot of grief by doing that. Dave?
Yeah, I think Jawan's last comment there, it's on the screen, is be around people. I take this I don't want this to be about me, obviously, but having just moved to a new city, having this support structure, I knew that every Thursday I was going to be on the show. That's something I can express my feelings. I'm not just sitting in my apartment, by myself or with my dog. But we have to identify that we need to build these structures. They're not going to happen just organically because we connect with somebody on LinkedIn, right, for example, as we've talked about earlier, or on Facebook or wherever it is. We have to start sharing things with people. We have to start going out and meeting people. What I did, 3 or 4 times since I've been here, I've gone to I've said, okay, here's my community that I want to build. ASIS is a security community. There's PI organizations that I'm a part of, that now I can start sending notes to people or going to meetings and actually pressing the flesh, if you will, and start shaking hands and getting to know somebody on a deeper level. That ends up being the support structure that I might need later for a job or for being able to be there for somebody else. Whatever it is, it's an active evolution. It's an active endeavor. We can't just expect that because I've talked to somebody once that's a support structure. That's someone I can support or not. I have to know deep down who they are, right, at some level. Whether it's deep or an inch deep, doesn't really matter in some level. But I can't just say, well, I'm connected with Joe Schmo on LinkedIn. I know him, and he's going to be there for me, or I can reach out to him for a job, or I can reach out to him when I'm in trouble. No, it takes connection. It takes deep, experiential, opportunities to know what's going on with our lives.
Yeah, that is so true. Jason?
Thinking about it, a lot of points in our lives, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're a manager, leader, or even if you're like in your department, you're one of the lead people in your department, sometimes a lot of us become the tip of the spear. And you're out there and you're in the front, and it's like, it's hard. You don't have a lot of peers at times, that you don't see a lot of peers that you have, and you can feel alone. And because of your role, you're used to having to be in charge and to getting things done and being by yourself. So you don't ask for help because you're like, no, I'll figure it out. That's why I'm here. And I'm, whatever level you're at. But then that's early days. And then you go, wait a minute, I can't do this by myself. I need help. I need support, and hopefully you've built that community around you as you've gone through it. And a lot of times we build communities and we don't see it. Dave was talking about, it doesn't happen organically, and it doesn't unless you make it, unless you allow it to. If you plant seeds and then things grow naturally, but if you're not planting seeds, you can't expect the tomato plant to show up on itself, so to speak. And so it's very important. And that's what we do. And we build that environment, to stick with that analogy, the rich soil, that you can be supported and that things are going to grow and things are going to happen. And it's so important because, when you get those moments, you might not see it every day. You're going about your life. Things are good. You're making things happen. You're strong. Yeah, I like people and I'm supporting others and whatever. But then something happens and you need that support. And if you don't have that structure built in, they say the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. You plant those to stay. I love nature and I just use a lot of nature metaphors, but and you build it up. And so when you do need the support, it's there. And people show up for you just naturally. They're going to show up for you because you've built those relationships over time. And that's so important.
Yeah, yes, it is so important. And what I realize is wherever you've been, there's a good chance you'll go back or end up back there.
Yeah.
So, what disciplines, what lessons did you learn the first time that makes it a little bit easier the second time? And usually it's just identification. It's like right before you're getting sick, you can feel like I'm getting weak, a little fatigued, a little tired. That tells you that, hey, a couple more steps and you actually are going to be sick. What can you do to alleviate the challenge or deal with it easier? I used to always, and I still am not a big fan of the dentist, and when I went to the dentist, they had a foot pump that would move the drill, so it wasn't, it was hydraulic or whatever you call it. And just the noise, the burning smell of your teeth or whatever they were doing was just freaking me out. And eventually I didn't go to the dentist enough and I ended up with even worse teeth. But I came to the conclusion that how much pain is there going to be? And usually it was about 10 seconds. And I said, for 10 seconds, I can think of anything else and get through it.
Yeah.
Because it's only, I know what it is and how much it's going to take. It's only when you don't know, when you're new to something, and this is unfamiliar, and you try directing it to something else or something else. And the other thing about people is that, doing 600 shows in a row, 7 days a week. Well, if you have people like Dave and Jason and Sarah and Catherine and Kelly and Harvey, it's a pleasure. Why? Because they're giving you a portion of their perspective, of their mindset, and you can live there for a while and get out of yours. And after a while, you say, well, if they can do it, maybe I can do it, and gives you some hope. The other thing is, when I was having some of these challenges, I was living in a mega mansion. I had money in the bank. I didn't have to work. So everything I thought that was going to be a benefit to me didn't help me at all because it was all inside of me, not outside of me. A new car wouldn't have made a difference. And after a while, you're feeling worse. I got all this stuff and I don't enjoy it anymore. And everything I have, freedom and good health and everything else, what am I doing with it? And there is a point of being self-pity, where you feel sorry for yourself and you feel you deserve better and you didn't get treated kindly or fairly. Well, grow up, at a certain point. And at the end, I was thinking just yesterday, everything you have here doesn't follow you when you leave here, right? But all the opportunities, all the pleasures, all the joys are here in front of you. So, and those are things that won't follow you, but you have available to you. So too many people focus on the future instead of where you are now. And there was times when I said, all I got to do is remember to breathe. That's where you got to start. Just remember to breathe and give yourself something to eat, whether you want to eat or not. You have to eat something or it's going to get worse. And slowly you build. And fortunately, I had great people around me who were supportive, who understood my situation. And that makes a difference because sometimes, like the bridge over troubled waters, you got to lay yourself down for someone to walk over and get through it. And there is a reward to that. And if you can do it, maybe you can help somebody else do it. And now your troubles aren't so bad,
Right.
A lot of times what you went through might be horrendous. But knowing you're going to save somebody from that experience or make it easier get you a dividend for it. And you never know what tomorrow brings, right? No one really thought they'd be where they are right now. Some people thought they'd be president or NBA player when they were 6 years old or an astronaut. At a certain point, reality starts showing up and say there's not many positions for a 5'6",
Point
forward or a center in basketball.
guard.
There are
I
people,
wanted to be a center.
you
I'm
know,
only 5'6".
but I think that's so important. And I think one other big thing is sense of humor. You got to be able to laugh. I mean, during some tough times, I just put on a bunch of comedies. And sometimes, even if you're holding yourself back from laughing, you can't hold yourself back forever. And, making achievements, making progress, being able to say, yesterday I did something I didn't think I was going to be able to do at this point. And I know Dave with his marathons and everybody else has their pursuits. You feel a little bit prouder being out there. How many times did you balance? Should I go outside and exercise? Should I do this? You're always happier when you do. When you decide, okay, I'll do it, I've never been on a vacation that I didn't enjoy, but I was always hesitant about going there because, well, it's going to cost this much, or I'm going to take time away from work. And again, in the early days, I'd go to Florida for a weekend, and Ann and the kids would stay the other 5 days because I thought I was so important to where I was. And you find out you truly aren't. And actually, people love being away from you, that you work with, because it gives them more opportunity for responsibility. And it shows you trust them. And I think that's the other thing, is you got to be able to trust somebody to be able to benefit from them. Dave?
Yeah, I know we're at the top of the hour here, and I just finish off with a couple thoughts from what you said there, Don. Is a sense of humor. Last week I said Sidney Freeman's famous quote from MASH. So don't take yourself too seriously. Drop your drawers and slide on the ice. Not an exact quote, but I think it's sense of humor is so important. Jason and I can always go back to our military days and our being veterans that. We had a lot of fun when we were doing things. We had dark senses of humor. We made light of very dark situations, and that got us through. Yeah. Very important. And it was a support structure that we didn't even understand at the time, probably. And most civilians probably looked at us like, those are some sick dudes. And it creeps out from time to time, even, 10, 20, 30 years later. But sense of humor will be one of your best support structures. And having those people that you can joke through life with is very critical. And to your point, Don, we have to remember where we are now. A lot of people say that anxiety is worrying about the future, depression is worrying about the past. And the reality is we're in neither at any given time. We're only where we are right now. I always go back to Dan Millman in his book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. That was a crucial read on my journey through COVID, just before COVID and during COVID, of getting me through those troubled times, getting me through the marathons, getting me through long runs and training. And I'll finish off with this: is support structures, development, and actually executing the times when you can be supportive. They don't happen out of spontaneity. They take the key word and the number one word that my kids have always hated hearing from me: practice. You need to practice being generous with your time, your ears, your experiences. Practice sharing those things with other people.
Yeah, you put it all together and wrapped a nice bow around it. And I'm so glad for these situations. Jason, I'll let you have final words.
A couple points. When we're giving support, when we're helping, does the person need a short-term fix or a long-term solution? Mm-hmm. Finding out what they need. To Dave's story, when I think you said it was your nephew came to you, he wasn't looking for you to tell him how to file for unemployment. He wasn't looking for you to how to file a claim or whatever. It was mindset and looking at it and digesting the bigger picture and building for growth. But if that person needs that short-term fix, then that's how we support them. We support them in the way that they need to. It's very important. And the last thing I'll say is that turn the camera around. We have to be open to support. So often we get in that role of being the supporter, and we love to do it. We love to be of service. Our friend Bob Berg, the go-giver, but you have to be open to receiving. And, within that reopen and receiving, there's a saying, the universe has to find you working. So, there's times that we can do for ourselves and there's times we can't, but you need to do what you can. And then the support will show up, and then be open to it as it does show up, because people want to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you feel worthwhile sharing your ability to support people and practicing, how do I get better at it? How do I get faster at it? And a lot of that is just being open-minded yourself and not worrying about what you're going to see, because expectation will create its own reality. Well, I know this is how it's going to work out. I know here's what I'm going to be dealing with. And you're already set the stage for something that didn't have to be that way. And there is something to being loving, just show some love to other people, some kindness. And that's all it takes is this, we got to get you to a change, a pivot, a beginning. Now you're there, right? Today is a new day. Your new life starts right now.
Yes.
And how many people, I found that when you go to a new place, a new town, you get to be a new person when you left one high school and went to a new high school. Nobody knew you at the new one. So what were you hoping to be and hoping people would see you as? Well, now you can act that role where people have known you for 10 or 15 years. You can't flip the cue cards on anybody. And sometimes the other thing is allow people to be alone at times. Allow people to have some peace and quiet, instead of let's go to the fair, let's go here, let's go there, let's do this, because they come back to where they left instead of going towards something that they can start beginning. So support has so much value, so much implication. Want to thank Jason, want to thank Dave, want to thank this audience. Oh, Harvey's still here. Well, thank you, Harvey, a gentleman of the highest caliber. And I know I've helped Harvey, and more importantly, or as important, Harvey has helped me as much or more. So thank you again, Harvey. Carolyn says thank you. And so thanks again. Glad I could join today. Bye. Come back any Thursday. We're here. And, just thanking people is a way of helping people.
Yeah.
Identifying something. Oh, that was so kind of you. Really? I didn't even think of it that way. But, now that you say it, I appreciate your appreciation, and it continues to lever up. So thanks again. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Come back next week. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Catherine Chadwick will be here again with Dave and Jason, and we'll have 4 people talking instead of 3. So with that said, bye. Support your